Titanic.
It was the largest moving object ever built by man. A ship of unmatched luxury and engineering, might. Her name would echo through history. And not for triumph, but for tragedy. Construction began in March 1909 in the Harland and Wolff shipyard. Titanic was more than a ship, it was a symbol of a new age. Nearly 900 feet long, over 46,000 tons, fitted with the most advanced technology of its time. Driven by 2 steam engines and a steam turbine, Titanic could cruise at 21 knots. She boasted 29 boilers, 159 coal-burning furnaces, and 4 towering funnels, though only 3 were functional. The Yaser 4th was cosmetic, added for grandeur. The interiors rivaled the best hotels of Europe. First-class passengers enjoyed Turkish bar, gymnasium, a heated swimming pool, and the famed grand staircase, a masterpiece of wrought iron and oak. On May 31, 1911, Titanic was launched into the River Lagan. The event drew tens of thousands of spectators. She was then towed for outfitting, a process that lasted nearly a year. April 10, 1912. Titanic was ready. She would sail from Southampton to Cherbourg, France, then Queenstown, Ireland, before heading west across the Atlantic to New York City. Among her 2,240 passengers and crew were millionaires, immigrants, families, adventurers. Some chased opportunity, others chased legacy, but none knew the shadow that followed. April 11, 1912. The Titanic was now on her journey across the Atlantic. The sky above was clear. The sea below like glass. For many passengers, it felt less like traveling and more like a dream, drifting through water. In first class, passengers dined on oysters, roast duck, and French wine under glittering chandeliers. In third class, families from Ireland, Scandinavia, and Eastern Europe played music, shared meals, and hoped for new beginnings in America. Titanic was more than a ship. It was a world of its own. A squash court, electric elevator, Turkish, baths, even a fully staffed wireless room run by 2 young operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride. But not all messages were personal. Ice warnings from other ships began to come in. Between April 11 and 14, Titanic received at least 7 warnings. Clear evidence that icebergs had drifted, unusually far south. Captain Edward Smith, respected and calm, was informed of these messages. Some were posted, some never reached the bridge. But one fact was certain: Titanic continued at near full speed, about 22.5 knots. At 9:40 p.m. on April 14th, the SS Californian sent a clear and urgent message: "We are stopped and surrounded by ice." Jack Phillips, overwhelmed with a backlog of passenger messages, replied sharply, "Shut up, I am busy." The night was unusually still. No waves, no moon, just darkness and silence. Icebergs were invisible without moonlight or breaking surf, and Titanic's lookouts had no binoculars. They had been misplaced after a last-minute officer reassignment. At 11:39 p.m., the ocean was quiet. Then just 1 minute later, Frederick Fleet saw it. "Iceberg, right ahead." First Officer William Murdoch ordered a hard turn to port and reversed the engines. The Titanic began to swing, but the iceberg struck. It scraped along the starboard side, damaging about 300 feet of hull. Not a single long gash, but dozens of jagged punctures. Rivets popped. Thomas Andrews, the ship's builder, was summoned. After studying the damage, he delivered the grim news to Captain Smith.
"Titanic will sink. It is a mathematical certainty."
At first, few believed it. Titanic was calm. Lights still glowed. The engines had stopped. There was no panic. But below, the icy Atlantic was flooding in tons per second. There were only 20 lifeboats on board, enough for about half the people. Not because of arrogance, but outdated maritime law, which required lifeboats based on ship tonnage, not capacity. Just a precaution, they said. But the truth was much worse. Titanic had less than 3 hours to live. April 15, 1912, just after midnight. A chill crept across the decks as passengers were asked calmly, at first, to don their life jackets and head topside. Few understood the gravity of what was happening. Titanic's builder, Thomas Andrews, moved through the ship. He carried no life jacket. He urged women and children to lifeboats, helping wherever he could. He knew the truth. The ship was dying. Captain Edward Smith remained composed, issuing the order to uncover the lifeboats. At 12:15 a.m., Titanic began firing distress rockets, white flares bursting silently over the Atlantic, unanswered. The first lifeboats were lowered half full. Many passengers hesitated. They believed Titanic was safer than a tiny boat in the freezing sea. The ship's lights still shone, the decks still dry. It was women and children first. Husbands kissed wives goodbye. Fathers told children they'd be right behind. Most never would be. Margaret Brown, later known as the unsinkable Molly Brown, tried to rally spirits in her boat. She would go on to help row, encourage others, and demand they return for survivors, a plea denied by the boat's crewmen in fear of being swamped. By 1:20 a.m., Titanic was noticeably listing forward. Panic began to spread. Lifeboats left faster now, filled with people climbing over one another for a chance at survival. In the midst of it all, Titanic's 8 musicians played. Directed by Wallace Hartley, they performed waltzes and hymns, not to calm themselves but others. Survivors recalled the final song, "Nearer, my God, to Thee." As lifeboats dwindled, collapsible rafts were brought forward. Many officers and crew tried desperately to free them as water surged up the bow. Wireless operator Jack Phillips stayed at his post, sending distress calls until power failed. His final message:
"We are sinking fast, women and children in boats. Engine room flooded."
At 2:18 a.m., the lights flickered and went out forever. Titanic's bow slipped beneath the surface. The stern lifted high into the sky, its propellers fully exposed. With a thunderous groan, Titanic broke in two. The stern settled briefly, then plunged downward. At 2:20 a.m., she was gone. Silence followed, then cries. Hundreds in the water, clinging to debris. But few boats returned. The water was 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Survivors could last only minutes. Only one boat. Lifeboat 14 returned. Officer Harold Lowe rescued a handful of men from the sea. The rest faded into the dark. The Titanic was gone. Over 1,500 people, men, women, and children, were left behind in the freezing Atlantic. In 28-degree water, hypothermia set in within minutes. The cries faded, and silence returned to the sea. Those in the lifeboats stared into the darkness, some clinging to hope, others in disbelief. A few held lanterns, others sang hymns or prayed. No one knew how long they would wait, or if anyone was coming. At 4 a.m., a light appeared. A ship, the RMS Carpathia, a Cunard liner, had raced through the ice at full speed for 3 hours, pushing her engines to the limit. Her captain, Arthur Rostron, had received Titanic's distress call just after midnight and changed course immediately. Lifeboats were spotted just before sunrise. One by one, the Carpathia pulled survivors aboard. Some were frostbitten, others couldn't speak. Many wept in relief or for those left behind. By 8:30 a.m., all the lifeboats had been recovered. Of Titanic's 2,240 passengers and crew, only 705 survived. Some survivors, like Margaret Brown, immediately began helping others. Blankets were shared, names recorded, stories slowly told, but the emotional scars would never fully fade. On April 18, 1912, Carpathia arrived in New York City. Thousands waited in silence. Families scanned the decks for loved ones. Most found none. For the survivors, it was a return not to celebration, but to mourning. And the questions began. Immediately. With Britain and the United States, investigations began. How did a ship labeled practically unsinkable vanish on its first voyage? Executives, officers, crew, and passengers testified. Key facts emerged. Ice warnings were received, but not all acted upon. Lifeboat drills were not held for passengers. Lifeboats launched half empty. There were not enough lifeboats for everyone. J. Bruce Ismay, chairman of the White Star Line, survived in a lifeboat. He claimed he helped others, first, and boarded when no women or children were nearby. Public opinion was divided. Some saw him as a coward, others as a man who made a decision in chaos. The disaster forced change. New maritime laws were passed. Lifeboats now required for all passengers. Round-the-clock radio operation became mandatory. The International Ice Patrol was established to track and report icebergs. For decades, Titanic's final resting place remained a mystery, until 1985, when Dr. Robert Ballard discovered the wreck 2.5 miles down. Her bow still hauntingly intact, her stern shattered by the descent. The sea had claimed her, but not her story. Titanic was more than metal and rivets. She carried hopes, dreams, and entire lifetimes. Her story is not just one of tragedy, but of human spirit, sacrifice, and the fragile line between ambition and fate. Titanic still rests in the depths, but her shadow floats forever above. This is Frame of Shadow. Stay curious, stay in the shadows.